Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards. I'm your host, Therese Tucker, and it's good to see you. And this week has been flying by. There's been so much going on. I'm sure that you all know what's happening in the US here, stuff like that. So it's good to be with you, even though I'm a little bit later than I wanted to be. And let's talk about what's happening in energy, because now we are officially in the shadow period of our last Mercury retrograde of 2024. Thank you for 4 Mercury retrogrades, universe. We love it. We love it. We're in the last Mercury retrograde of 2024. And interestingly enough, it's Mercury in Sagittarius. So it's about mental expansion, which I think is going to be a good topic. So with Mercury right now in its shadow, it's going retrograde. It will be full retrograde on November 25th, and it will last through December 15th. And then, of course, we have another shadow period coming out of that. But that means that we're in a time right now where we really need to pay attention to how we're communicating. And that brings me to the message from the team. And the message is one about compassion and understanding that your perspective is what colors your view of the world. So the world has events. The world has things that happen. But our perspective is like a pair of glasses that will tint what we see and tell us information about what we're looking at based on what we believe about it. So the message from the team is be mindful of your perspective and what you're telling yourself about the world or other people at large, because this can either open your heart or close your heart. And if you feel like you're being tested, you're right. You're being tested yet again. Yet again, we're getting these tests because what's really going to show whether or not we are ready to continue to advance is how we handle situations, whether it's a situation you really like or one that you don't. And what I'm seeing right now in the world, especially from the people who don't like it, I'm seeing a lot of ego and reactivity. And that's interesting because it creates reactivity when you see it, right? So when you're noticing what's going on, and there's a lot of vitriol, it's a lot of mixed emotion happening right now, which happened last time as well. I mean, it's just pretty much any election cycle, but it feels like it ramps up every 4 years. It just ramps up more and more. And we're seeing this real backlash and the ego coming out in people. And again, the ego is what is tainting our perspective on the world at large. And this isn't to make anyone wrong. Anybody would, right? And it's like, if we get triggered to react, we're going to react. However that may be, we are being called to consider if our perspective is helping us or hampering us. And the message from the team is our goal is to respond with compassion. And it doesn't matter what side anyone falls on any of this, whether they're for something or whether they're against something. Compassion is still what we're being called to. That's the call. And remember what they said. They said the harder it is to show up for it, the more that you know you're doing it. So if it feels hard to come to a place of compassion and yet you still are able to get there, then you really know that you passed that test. You really know you activated that compassion, especially when everything in you doesn't want to, right? When it's easy for your heart to be open, that's not the test. The test is when you want to keep your heart closed, but you choose to keep it open. That's the test, and you will know that you have passed it. And so how do we help ourselves get into a compassionate place, whether we're triggered by something that happened or we're triggered by watching people react to something that's happened? We must look at our perspective, because whether you're viewing world events or you're viewing individuals in your life, You're viewing it through a perspective, and and that perspective means that there's something being laid on top of what is there. We're not really looking at it objectively. We're putting a subjective spin on what we're looking at. And when we put that subjective spin on it, then we stop seeing it clearly for what it is, right? Because we're emotionally now relating to it. And so, how do we find compassion? We find compassion by examining our perspective. Nothing about this is asking you necessarily to change your perspective. If your perspective is helping you, why would you change it? But if you find it's causing you a lot of pain, it's causing you to see people that you love as now someone that you don't want to love or you don't want to trust, then that is actually a perspective that's harming you, not so much others. The irony is when we have those feelings of vitriol towards another, there's a belief in our ego that they're going to be punished by us feeling this pain, right? They're going to wish they didn't do that. And the truth is it has no actual effect on them. Who it's really affecting is you. So it's that metaphor of, I'm going to drink this poison and then you'll see, you'll pay, right? That's not how it works. When we drink a poison, the one who gets poisoned is the one who drank it. And that's what a unhealthy perspective on a situation can do. It can cause you to poison yourself in hopes that it will inflict the kind of pain onto another that you are personally feeling. And so this perspective examination, it has a couple layers to it. The first layer is you're allowed to feel what you feel, right? If you're disappointed or you're upset, you're allowed to have that feeling. That's legitimately how you feel. Then we have to be aware of whether or not I'm projecting that around me. Am I projecting that into the world? Am I taking that disappointment and turning it into fear? And to be sure, in this test, what makes it a little harder is that there is intentional energy, intentional messages sent out to activate your ego. Don't think that that's not happening. That's actually kind of one of the hurdles you have to get past, is that there is plenty of messaging and there's plenty of upsetting information to really churn up the negativity, because the dark is not going down without a fight. And this isn't to say any one person is dark. I'm just saying the energy of darkness will not go down without a fight. And we're getting closer and closer to the end. The battle that we must go through between the good and evil, if you will, of it all, the dark and the light of it all. As the light continues to shine brighter and brighter, the darkness isn't just going to be like, oh, the light's too bright, I'm out. The darkness will fight its biggest fight to win right at the end. And it's got nothing to lose. So it'll put everything it's got into it, and that's a classic battle. I'm talking about something that's quite archetypical. It's an archetypal type of battle, but it exists in every level, including within our own higher self and ego. Like before the ego really subdues itself, it will fight like crazy to stay in control. So even this message, which is intended to help everyone, including myself, stay in places of compassion where we feel triggered, might actually activate the ego and create more anger and rage, which I hope it doesn't, but it could. It could, because the ego does not want to secede its own power. And since this ego on the individual level does it, but so does it collectively, if you will. There is this, remember, ego is connected to the idea of separation. It's connected to the idea of individualism, so much so that how could we possibly be connected? So of course there is an internal ego on the personal level, but there's also a collective ego, if you will, that also believes in this idea of separation. And it's moments like these that are very polarizing, no matter which way you go, that really activates that social ego, that group desire to separate and block and destroy and denounce and vilify. It's so activated right now, which is why it's one of the greatest tests. And interestingly enough, happening right before we go into a Mercury retrograde where communication is more difficult because everybody's thoughts are so internalized. The problem with a Mercury retrograde, if you will, is that everything about the thinking process has internalized. It's more of a review process. And then maybe in an ideal situation, we would take like a full month off of communicating and just be Zen monks sitting on a hilltop somewhere, meditating on am I an effective communicator? Am I effectively getting my point across? When I speak, am I speaking in a way that's polarizing? Like there's so much we could benefit from being able to just sit and internalize. Of course we can't. Life must go on. That luxury, it comes from another lifetime, I guess, but not this one, right? In this one, life continues, work happens, communication and relationships continue to move forward in a very polarizing period. So the methodology of working through a Mercury retrograde is to be very considerate about what you're saying. Like, let me run this through my own filter. Would I be able to receive that in a non-reactive way, or would that be very triggering if I said that, right? And these are the things that we're asked to do. And of course, listening is also incredibly important during a Mercury retrograde. If you want to move through it with ease, is obviously to listen. But here we are in this very testy moment where we're being asked to stay in our higher self, to remember our oneness. And remember that oneness doesn't mean homogeneous thought. It doesn't mean homogeneous perspective. The ocean has different size waves, but they're all a part of the ocean. The ocean has a surface and it has a depth. It's all a part of the ocean, right? It's understanding our oneness doesn't mean hive mind. Oneness means connection. Oneness means a facet of something larger. And if we can stay connected to that and say, I might not agree with someone, but I can understand. There's compassion. Can understand where you're coming from. And just on a spiritual note, the fear that's being drummed up is meant to keep you in your ego. And the solution to that is to choose oneness, is to choose connection and compassion. And as you do that, you'll see where the fear is being injected. And it'll become easier to let it pass you by rather than let it take you under. There's so much good that's happening and might not be seen right away, but it will be seen. And you need to understand that no matter what the world shows you, whether you think it's the best thing that's happened ever or you think it's the worst, you have the power to live on the highest timeline no matter what is happening. If it had gone the other direction, I'd be saying this to people, who were pushing against that. You are not a victim of someone else's creation. You're a co-creator. It doesn't matter what the outside world is doing. You are a co-creator and you are on the timeline you desire. Do not let fear thoughts pull you down to a lower timeline. You use your personal sovereignty and power to take you to the timeline, the life that you wish to experience, because it's very much in your hands at the personal level. And when people get that, the collective level starts working itself out more than you think. And if you're worried about what's happening at the collective level, this is a loving reminder that you're trying to rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. You cannot change the outside, but you can change the inside, and changing the inside affects the outside, right? It's like the outside is the projector screen. It's not where the movie's playing. The movie's being projected onto this screen. You want to change the movie, change what's going on in here. You will affect what's on the screen. truly and truly. And so with that, I want to take you deeper by going into this week's karma cards. All right, if you're new to karma cards, let me quickly show you how these work. I have 3 decks here: planets, signs of the zodiac, and the houses of astrology. And I've already asked my team, what is the message for this week? And I've got 2 sets of answers, a set in red, which are action related, and a set in blue, which are outcome related. And the way that you play is you tune in with that beautiful intuition of yours and feel, what is the guidance you need this week? Are you looking for some guided actions to take, or are you curious about how things resolve? And of course, you can always choose both. And while you're choosing, let me tell you the timing for this reading. This reading is for November 8th through November 13th. And the flavor of this reading, we've got Mars. That makes sense. Mars is a planet of action. It gets very passionate, can get very angry, and if not kept in check, it can get very violent. So there's a simmering temper element to what's going on. In the sign of Sagittarius, remember this represents mental expansion and higher ideals, right? So seeing that bigger picture, understanding it from the 40,000 foot view. In the 10th house generally represents your career, but it can also mean the energy you're putting out in the world, sort of your legacy. What are you leaving behind for others? All right, for those who are choosing action, your spiritual action at this time is to energize your highest ideals responsibly. It's just like I was saying before, you're wanting to make sure, so your highest ideals, the things that you want to see happen in the world, if you're trying to control the outside, you're trying to affect the screen. That's just what the movie's being projected onto. The projector is in here. That's where it's responsible. It's like, how am I looking at this first? Even if you feel like, well, I'm looking at this in a real positive way. Okay, so what are you going to do with that positive perspective? How are you going to energize that? Take it into action. If you're feeling good about how things are going, how are you going to help spread that energy or reflect that into the world? And if you're not feeling great about how things are happening right now, what are you going to do to raise yourself up to the highest timeline? Because you have a choice there. You can energize that negative energy and put it out in the world, but is that going to help you? Because you're going to we get back what we put out, right? So if we're putting out all this anger, hate stuff, all that comes kind of back in a way. And it's saying your highest ideals. So what do you want? If you're not liking what this is, spend time in there and consider, what is it I want and how do I project that out into the world? Mental action at this time. Confront the rules of success. I think this is interesting because I feel like the word success is another word for karmic return. Success is merely the reflection of the energy you've put out. If you think about this in a completely other category, like work, your success is 100% based on the effort and energy you put into it. If you half-ass a job, you're going to get half-assed results, right? So that means confront that energy within yourself. It's 100% based on what you put into it is what you get out. If you're putting a bunch of fear and anger and hatred and it's just worst case scenario, no wonder what you're getting back is causing so much pain to you, right? So it's like, you got to pay attention to that. And it would be the same no matter the scenario, no matter the outside event. That is the standard rule. That's the standard rule of karma. It doesn't matter what the outside inciting factors are. It's based on what you're putting into it. So notice if this is pulling on you in some way. You know, I'm speaking to those I love who feel upset and angry and want to shut down and want to emote the worst possible scenario. What is that doing to you? What is it robbing you of right now? I'm assuming it's robbing you of peace, maybe of a decent night's sleep, maybe of your appetite, maybe some loved ones. Maybe it's making you consider them as somebody who you don't want to love. Maybe it's putting strain in your life and on your relationships. even if you're not outwardly saying something, if you're angry at someone for holding something, you might feel like I'm strained with that person, right? And it's affecting you the most. So consider consider that energy and what it's doing on the inside, and understand that you can start clearing that for yourself right now. The rules of karma or success or of energetic return are the same no matter the circumstances. So we have more control over how the outside experience affects us than we might understand. You don't need other people to change. You need to shift something in yourself that tells you you don't have power and that you should hold so much anger or so much fear. That's what you want to confront, right? Also, if you want to tell people I told you so, or be smug, right? All of that energy, none of that feels good either. That's another type of energy that keeps people isolated. It keeps them, because there's a hierarchical belief. I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, I figured it out, right? It's this idea of better is another term for separate. It's just another way to focus on that. And so again, we're all of us. It doesn't matter where we land on things. All of us are being tested to find our compassion. And when it's a test, when it's not easy to do. When you don't want to feel compassion, when you feel like other people made your life hell and now you want to make their life hell. That is not compassion. It's not compassion when you want to harshly judge someone and decide that they're evil because you don't like what they decided. That's not compassion, right? So this is the test. And yes, it's exhausting. And yes, you'd like to opt out. I think a lot of us would like to opt out. But the way we win this, the success we're going to have, is our willingness to put in the effort when we really don't want to, or when we really are tired, or when we really feel like it's unjust. Can we get over that and still choose it? That will be a great mile marker for us to know how ready we are to move up in frequency. Because when we're moving up into the higher timeline, it's not about a political belief or a social belief. It's not about that. It's about choosing oneness over separation. So these moments, though sometimes painful or frustrating or aggravating, are the moments where we really are going to find out if we're ready to move forward or not. And I'm really hoping we are. Physical action at this time: force yourself to get out into the world and become a person of power and status. I think the thing that's throwing me off are power and status. So I'm asking my team, please explain that. And they're saying power in the sense of, I feel a sense of grounding, control, temperament. I feel a sense of tempering in myself, right? I have control over myself. So I know that I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be responsive. A responsive person is consciously choosing how they wish to be in the world. And in this case, the desire here is compassionate, understanding, forgiving, loving. These are the desired responsiveness. And they're saying, you have an amazing power to affect the world. Stop trying to rearrange those deck chairs. Focus on that. Can you do it? Can you stand in your choice of, this is who I say I am? Now it's like, it's time to put the pedal to the metal, or it's time to test your metal, rather. It's time to test that. You say you're compassionate. Do it right now. This is not easy. Can you do it? You say you're loving. Do it right now. Can you do it? You say you're understanding. Understand, right? You say you're forgiving. Forgive. Love. Choose those higher ideals that you say you want. It's easy to do it when it feels easy, right? It's like, it's easy to do it when there's no threat. It's easy to do it when you feel safe. How about when you don't? Can you do it? I feel like out of all the versions we could get to really test this, this one is pretty, as extreme as it feels, it's still easier, believe it or not. It's still easier. There's much harder tests to take. And I'm like, thank you for this easy test. Tests aren't meant to be enjoyable or comfortable, but thank you for an easier one. And even that helps you relax and calm down, and you find your nervous system is more solid. And the same thing with the power and status is also nervous system control, right? Because if you have that sense of being able to self-regulate, then you don't fly off the handle at things, and things don't get to you in that way, and you can stay responsive. And so it's asking yourself to force yourself to do it. That's Mars talking. Mars is aggressive, but it's like, just do it, right? Like, don't make excuses for why you can't. Just do it. All right, so now let's look at outcomes for Mars in Sagittarius in the 10th house of either career or what you're putting out into the world. Spiritual outcome at this time, the drive for insights to understand your destiny. It's interesting when they talk about destiny right now, they're like, where are you heading? Where are you heading in this ascension journey? We get choices. A lot of people think it's like predetermined somehow, and no, it's by choice. And this is one of those moments, again, that's going to cause you to get clarity and really think about it. It's like, I'm choosing the highest timeline. Okay, what does your behavior look like on the highest timeline? That's a very confronting question, but it's very helpful, because if on the highest timeline your behavior looks the same as what you're doing right now, keep going. If it doesn't, adjust to what your vision is. This is going to be so helpful for us, and we're going to feel a desire to want to get it. Mental outcome at this time, the confronting of the wisdom of where you're going. Again, it's kind of repeating itself. You're going to the highest timeline. You are going up in frequency. You're going up in consciousness. As we go up, and especially as we go up positive, we are becoming more and more in a consciousness of oneness. We are really getting that. And we are getting clarity on what does that oneness mean. It means that we stop worrying about what is another faction of my whole self doing. Because if we understood the goal of Source, which is to know itself, what that information tells us already is that there is more to Source than one homogenous belief. There isn't one. In fact, Source, because it would be very easy, Source would be like, oh, look in the mirror. Oh, yep, that's me. That's all one big blob of me. I get it. And the experiment would be over. But Source understands its own nuance. It says, there's so many facets to me. There's so many versions of me. There are so many variations of me. I wish to know them all. And as we get closer to our sense of oneness, we start thinking like that. And it starts right now, getting to know yourself on this interpersonal levels. There's so many facets of me. There's so many ways. There's a part of me that's absolutely okay. There's a part of me that's devastated. There's a part of me that's celebrating. There's a part of me that's crying. There's a part of me that's hiding in fear. There's a part of me that feels so empowered, right? There's so many facets of you going on. As we increase our consciousness, we start thinking about that collectively. There are so many facets of me, and we're not afraid of those. And so this is asking us to get in touch with that wisdom. I'm not afraid of what is different. I'm not afraid at all. I'm curious. I'm interested. And I'm like, it makes me appreciate my perspective more, seeing its opposite. Or it makes me more contemplative about my own thoughts, hearing your thoughts, right? These things help to serve us to not only understand the other person more, but to understand ourselves even deeper. And so when we start to see it like that, we stop resisting what is different, and we start appreciating what it's showing us, because it's giving us the clarity we're always seeking. Physical outcome at this time, action resulting from the understanding of your career or what you're putting out in the world. So it's just letting you know that during this period of time, as you look more inward, right, at what's being projected out versus looking at the screen, then you start to see what's operating here. What am I putting out? Oh, yeah, I'm putting out frustration and putting out anger and putting out sorrow and putting out fear. Is that what I want to be contributing to this? And if the answer is yes, you keep doing it. If not, you start cleaning that up. And you're like, I got to help myself here. Make sure that you understand that whatever you're feeling is valid. You're allowed to have that, but those feelings are coming from thoughts. Start to investigate those thoughts. Ask yourself if this is helping you personally. If it's not, what thought would actually empower you? What thought would give you a sense of safety or security back? What thought would help you rise up to the level of compassion that we're all being asked to? What are those thoughts? That's going to be your foundational building block to getting there. And in the meantime, know that you are safe and you are loved, and that there's a lot of fear being projected and a lot of it's false. Until you can get there for yourself, know that somebody's holding you energetically. And if you're not in a place of fear, if you're in a place of comfort or joy or contentment, how can you help to create more compassion from your perspective? If you're in a place of neutrality, how can you help to create more compassion from your perspective? And as we do that work individually, we impact the collective. And with that, I'm sending you so much love. Mwah.